Hello and welcome to another episode of Don't Shit on the Bus. I am your host, Adam Omokayas, tuning in all the way from Los Angeles, California for episode number 75 with my good friend, Andrew Weiss. Now, Andrew comes to us with a lot of experience, man. I mean, Andrew's been doing this for more than twice as long as I have, and I think as long as I've been alive. So he has a lot of perspective that not a lot of our guests have. And that's just due to his time on the road. In addition to that, he's toured in many different ways. So he's worn a lot of hats. So I think that gives him a very good perspective on, what it's like to be in charge, what it's like to be the person not in charge, what it's like to be working locally. And if I could sum up today's episode, I would say we talked about what it takes to tour for a living. And when I say that, I mean, he kind of broke it down as there's people who come and do this for a summer and they decide it's not for them and they go do something else. And there's people who come and they do this for a living and they're addicted and it's all they do. And I think we're kind of leaning more towards the latter, right? Like we want people to do this and do this for a long time. And he taps into some of the things that make you able to do this for a lifetime, a long period of time, or for a career. And, he has a family. He's been doing this on the road for 30 years, like I said. And that is not an accident. He's got balance. He's got commitment. He's grown with his career. He's able to grow with his artists. And I think that's the key to success in this industry is being able to learn, constantly learn. And while you're on the road, fit in well, always work hard, work as a team, and be a pleasure to be around. And he touches on a lot of different areas that when you bring them together, allow you to tour for a living. So thank you, Andrew, for sharing your knowledge. I appreciate you. And thanks for coming on the podcast. I don't think Andrew's done one of these before. Maybe he has. I don't remember. But whatever it is, I felt very honored to have him on here. I met him in my touring career when I kind of went from being in a van and a bus to being on a bus with hotel rooms. And he was the first tour manager to give me a hotel room. I tell him that on the podcast. But I've always kind of been a little bit intimidated by him. And it's not that he's intentionally intimidating, although he does admit to playing into his emotionless personality sometimes. It's that he's just a very good tour manager, and good tour managers, they're friendly, but they're also stern. They're kind of this balance of like, could I make you mad if I asked you this? They make you think about everything you say to them, but it's in a good way. And to have him on the podcast and talk with him and sit down and kind of just be able to talk across from him it was really nice because when we're working, that doesn't exist. He's so busy on the road. If I ever see him, I step into his office, we get to catch up a little bit, but not like we did on this podcast. So I hope you enjoy listening as much as I did learning and listening myself. All right, with that being said, as always, thank you so much to our patrons for the weekly contributions that make this podcast possible. Connor and I appreciate it. Eva appreciates it. We post articles. We post podcast episodes. We're here to educate and help everybody the best we can. This week, let's welcome Chris, Zach, and Drew. And special shout out to Dawn and Zach from 2 weeks ago. I didn't realize, but Zach used to work at the gym I went to in San Diego. And Dawn is his lovely wife. And she would always play the sickest music at the gym. I'd be like working out and be like, Paramore, 21 Pilots. Well, those are on the top of my head because they're related to Andrew. But it'd be like some new metal. And I'd be like, all right, who's working here? And I go to the front desk, and that's kind of how I met him. And then sooner or later, Zach's like, yeah, I'm going to Silverstein this weekend, about to, be in the mosh pit. I'm very excited. And I was like, all right, these are my people. And they're very, very cool people. So thank you guys for supporting. I hope you listen to these episodes. I know some of them are a little more educational, but you like the industry as much as I do, even though you're more on the fan side. I appreciate you. Anyway, thank you guys so much for contributing to the podcast. I will see you next week on Don't Shit on the Bus. Hey, Andrew, how's it going, man?
Great. How you been?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know you're very busy, and I understand you just got back, as most of my friends did, from Coachella. How was it?
It was my first time at Coachella, and it was actually a lot better than I thought it would be because we were under, Billie Eilish's Camp's umbrella, and we were playing as, we were performing as a guest of Billie Eilish. So for my first time at Coachella, it was really, really easy because I just kind of relied on their team to get us moved around, and we came in, late in the afternoon, and we left late. It was probably couldn't be more perfect for what we do for a living in terms of ease. Probably not I've got so many friends that have nightmare stories about getting in and out of Coachella, and I heard a few while I was there, but I was blessed.
Yeah, that wasn't your experience. I mean, I think that goes hand in hand with, like you said, working with one of the headliners and being a guest and not having too many things to do throughout the day. It was probably a pretty lax day compared to a lot of the things you've done.
It was a lot of fun, and I think Haley was really happy to kind of step back into the light there. I think she had an absolute blast with it, and it was fun to get out there and support her.
Yeah, that's great. I can't believe, like, I know that since you've never been to Coachella, I'm assuming that means Paramore's never been to Coachella. That's crazy.
That is correct.
Wow. Well, awesome. Yeah, I didn't really know why you were going there when you told me. And then I put it all together when I saw the social media post. I was like, Haley's there, Andrew's there. It all makes sense. Everything went well. And that's amazing.
That is correct.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining me. I mean, I usually like to start the podcast thinking about when I first met my guest. And I first met you in this part of my career where the band I was touring with, A Day to Remember, kind of leveled up, or they went from touring in a van or a bus with their crew they started out with to having a crew that had been doing this longer than they did, and enter Andrew Weiss as a tour manager. And you were the first person to ever give me a hotel room on tour.
When you say that to me, it makes me wonder if it was in the budget and I had made a mistake. Like, were you supposed to be couch surfing on the bus, or was that something that did nobody look after you before? Did they just assume you would be floating?
I mean, it was not just my first time having a hotel room, but my first time with A Day to Remember having a hotel room. So as a whole, that band and crew had never been in one prior. And specifically that time I remember because we were sharing hotel rooms. You know, sometimes people do that before they can afford their own hotel room. And the crew member I was with was significantly more weathered and old than me and was not excited to be in a hotel room with me.
Yeah, the guy that I took over for, I think, was struggling with the band's growing pains. So when I stepped in there that first time, I just remember that was a big adjustment to try to get him used to some of the touring standards, and hotel rooms would be one of those, and not trying to live out of a bus once you can afford it, But yeah, they were. I didn't do most of the hiring on that first tour, so the veterans that were around, I think, on that first run were not ones that I had hired. I just kind of inherited it from the person on our place.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the term growing pains is so interesting to me, and people who haven't toured or been in the industry a while might not know it, but it kind of happens when a band's size grows faster than their abilities of their crew, and they have to cycle out crew and bring in people who have done this for a long time.
On the band side, you hear two arguments about that. Our industry is full of thousands of people out there that will tell you that the band got big and they forgot them or they left them. It's unfortunate when you hear that, because the reality is that if a band has a quick rise, it's a real challenge for a crew member to expand their skill set and keep up with them. And the demands, that are expected on each individual when you're riding in a van versus when you're walking onto an arena stage, everything it expands exponentially, and it's unfortunate. You never want to think that you have to cycle through crew as you expand. I think it's fantastic when people rise with the artist and advance their careers as well as the artist. But there is that unfortunate turnover if you reach a point where like your skill set's where it's going to be, and the band needs more. Unfortunately,
yeah, it's hard to keep up. And hopefully people don't take it personally. And I'm sure earlier on in your career, you experienced that. And then eventually you caught back up, and, now you're entering at that higher level, or you're laterally stepping into new setups, not just, starting at the bottom and working your way up every time, which has got to be a good feeling.
Yeah, I think the more experience you have, the more, some of it just takes walking into 1,000 venues and 1,000 different shows and gaining experience to kind of have that crisis management skill and everything. In some places, you can't really replace experience. And our industry in general doesn't have a lot of avenues of training, school programs or something to teach you actually how to be a touring technician. There are more now than there were when I started, but there's not a lot. So you do get out there and you have to, expand your skill set. And sometimes that means you might shift around. If you're a guitar tech, you might do a couple of club bands before you get your first shot onto a theater arena stage. And then for some people, if they've just got the intuitive ability, they can rise. So
yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of kind of growing and starting in the industry, where did you start at? What was your life like, I guess, before you toured? And then how did you enter the touring industry?
It really, really started when I was in high school and mixing sound for my church. As a kid who was probably looking to get into trouble, the youth group tried to kind of get me something to focus on, and that became mixing youth group services. And that translated into trying to learn about sound equipment and mixing sound. When I went to college, I had my heart set on doing live music, but I stepped kind of laterally. I decided to get a degree in technical theater. When I did that, I went to theater school. I went to Florida State University in Tallahassee, and I ultimately got a BFA in technical theater from the School of Theater there. But the entire time that I was at school, I stuck with working as a stagehand and working for a local sound and light company. And I really enjoyed both. I love doing theater work and I love doing a live sound, but there was more of a draw to the live entertainment stuff, the live music than there was to theater ultimately. And certainly a better path financially. So once I got my BFA in theater, I kind of let the music roots take over and drifted right back into touring. I started at FSU in 1988. I didn't graduate till 1997. I took off in 1992 and went on tour for a few years as a lighting tech. When I returned to school, kind of realized I did a number of tours that were kind of what you'd call at bottom of the barrel at the time. I was so excited to get out and tour, and I was tired of college. So I went out and traveled the country for a few years doing some tours that were, let's just say, rough.
In a van?
No, it was, I was working as a technician for sound companies, a sound and lighting company that was getting kind of low end stuff. So instead of, being piled up in a van with a band, it would be like piled up with four guys riding in a semi, sharing the sleeper. Not something you hear a lot of. And I certainly wouldn't recommend anybody go that route anymore. So I just kind of did some real rough tours and finished up and said, I kind of don't think I like the way this is starting for me. So I went back and got my degree. When I finished with my degree, I came on staff at Florida State University as a sound designer and electrician, and thought that maybe I would stay in theater then. But that's in 1997, and shortly after that, a friend of mine, a nightclub owner named Jeff Hansen in Tallahassee, had a band there that kind of taken off in Tallahassee named Creed, and he was kind of starved for resources in Tallahassee for anybody that had toured before. So he asked me if I would take on tour managing them. And tour management was something I never really considered doing. So I agreed with a contingency that maybe I could become a lighting designer or sound guy for the band. I just never stepped back into that. I started tour managing Creed, and they shot up fast. This is like 97 through 2002. And so once I started doing that, I just never went back to anything tech-wise. I've always been a tour manager or production manager since.
It's wild to hear how, you talk about going to school, you talk about touring in the semi, you talk about working at the local church. These are all things we've talked about on the podcast, just trying to get involved in the industry. And you really were living it. You were just doing everything you could to get involved. Was there any aspect of that you would have turned up a notch, turned down, or maybe for people trying to get into the industry nowadays, what can you say is the most important part to focus on for them?
Well, if you want to be in the industry, as a tour manager, production manager, I wouldn't change a thing that I did. If you want to be a lighting designer, which I, for a time, thought I did, or a production designer, I was kind of chastised a bit, especially in school, because if I could get a job driving a truck to a show, I would drive the truck. If I could get a job building the stage or doing high steel rigging, whatever I could do, I did it. I was admonished by my professor to say, if you want to be a lighting designer, you need to be designing lighting. You need to not be distracted by everything else. But I think it made me more versatile. I'd run out the door and go do any gig that I could make a buck at, as long as I was at a show. That paid off when I turned around. I started tour managing because I had been exposed to other departments and other, aspects of the business. That doesn't mean everybody needs to do it that way, but most production managers, I think, are like that. They've traveled through a few tech positions and had an awareness of everything going on that helps. I think some tour managers that are really specified, like really focus on an artist bubble, especially at the arena level, may not really look for a background like that. But I've always been appreciative of it. It did look, by the time I was graduating from theater school with a 4-year degree that took me 9 years because of all my distractions, an argument could be made like, what am I going to do? I'm not a lighting designer per se, because I keep doing whatever comes up. But then the thing that came up was tour management, and it just fit really well.
Man, yeah, I like that you're kind of talking about just having this wide or this vast variety of knowledge is so helpful, because being a tour manager or production manager, you have to work and connect all these different pieces together, and knowing what the LD is doing throughout the day, knowing what the PM, knowing what all these other people are doing throughout the day probably makes your job so much easier and so much more desirable to work with you from those other positions.
Sometimes people think it's great if you're aware of their department. Some people, I think, would appreciate it if I'd stay out of there a little bit, Plus, there's, I make jokes these days. I talk to lighting designers on my tours, but with an interest in what they're using and what lights. But my continuing education stopped almost 25 years ago. So, I went from knowing what they're doing to knowing enough to be dangerous to probably just being annoying or slowing them down while they're programming, because I'm in the middle of questions with very dated knowledge. So there's two sides to that. There's people who definitely appreciate that you kind of stick into the fundamentals of their department. And there's definitely people who are like, you go do your thing and, we're good here. So you build a team around you, hopefully, that, has a matching skill set that kind of appreciates where you like to be involved.
I never thought of it that way. It was funny listening to it, though. I'm just picturing you like seeing, it's like, you're seeing what other people are doing and you're understanding what they're doing right or wrong. And I like how you described it as, as you stopped 25 years ago, then your knowledge is not as updated on these other jobs or refined. So that's a funny way to think of it.
I make jokes with sound guys all the time. I mean, I did for a while, work mixing monitors for Creed. And there was a joke we had with them, at the time. I was filling in. And that was the last time I mixed audio for anybody. It's like 1997. It's way before digital consoles or fiber optic snakes and everything. So every once in a while, somebody makes a joke about me stepping in an audio. I tell them they're going to have to go to some boneyard or some sound company to find something I can actually operate.
Oh, man. It's cool. I mean, I haven't had very many people on here who have toured for such a long time. And going through those changes in your career, I always say, like, I picture the old touring days being much more like kind of road dog and a little more, I don't know, not as welcoming. Do you find that the touring industry as a whole has become more, I mean, how has it changed on a very big level?
Is the touring business more open and supportive of younger people? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know. I don't know if that's the fact that I don't necessarily work in the same genre I did at the beginning. Take the first decade of my career was mostly metal or heavy rock bands, Metallica or Korn. And back then it was really, really competitive markets. And yeah, there was a possessiveness to what you did. You didn't find a lot of people wanting to share. By the time I started doing Paramore, which was 2008, 2009, they're coming out of the Warped Tour and there was a whole different mindset. It was a, help your fellow person. We're all in this together kind of mindset that I didn't see in the rock and metal days. I think when I step into those lanes, or if I'm doing some work with one of those rock groups, I do feel like it's gotten better. But I think also the genre, has helped. So I don't know. There might have been more supportive areas than I was in when I first started, but I felt those first 10 years. Now I had, Creed went from a band to an arena act really quickly, and I was kind of an unknown in the industry. So I did feel like that somebody was always kind of gunning for my job behind my back.
Yeah,
I felt that quite a bit. So I do think it's better, but it could have been a factor of where I was at, or maybe how intimidated I was stepping into the industry back then too.
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's a lot of variables and you're not sure what to attribute it to. That makes sense. Well, I hope that it's better now. I mean, just having you on here to me is a testament to that people are more open to sharing their knowledge and talking about things, because even when I started, which is right around when you were with Paramore, but I was obviously in Vans around that time, it was hard to, and again, maybe it's a reflection of myself on the tour, but it was hard to get other people to teach me things on the road, or people were kind of closed off. And, I was kind of classified it as people who are kind of roadies or people who have been doing it for a long time. Like when you first start Warped Tour, you kind of get that tough love vibe from a lot of the stage managers.
I hope that everybody is more inclusive in sharing. Like I said, there's educational programs now, at least there's more than there used to be, like MTSU in Tennessee. But, you still kind of got out here and get into it. And I think that the work's demanding. I don't mind a little bit of tough love, but I do like people saying, hey, do this, you can grab this, don't shit on the bus is a fundamental. I think everybody learns pretty quickly.
Yes.
It's nice to see. I'm at a stage now. I've been touring since 1992 off and on.
30 years this year.
Yeah, it'll be 30 years this year. And,
congratulations.
It'll be like August. It'll be 30 years. And I'm way more receptive now than I used to be. If somebody calls and says, hey, do you have a sheet that can show me how to do X, Y, or Z? Or, Have you been in this city, or how do you tackle this problem? I like those calls a lot, and I hope that it helps. The more people share, the better I think off everybody is.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll help everybody all around if, people have more knowledge coming in. You can't, nobody wants to shit on the bus. Nobody wants to come on tour and make that mistake that's so easily avoidable. It'd be so helpful if you just told somebody that. Oh, man. All right. One thing I wanted to ask you was, I've worked with you as a tour manager, and then I know you kind of cross over to a production manager sometimes. Why are tour manager and production managers so closely intertwined in sometimes one job? And when do they become impossible to maintain as one entity and require two separate people?
Well, they're similar because both the tour manager and the production manager are planning the day and planning your moves in the future. So on a smaller and more intimate scale, TM is going to be the guy if you're driving the van or driving the Sprinter, or maybe even in one bus. If you're in one bus, everybody's going to go to the same place because they can't travel separately. Your band and crew are staying in the same place. You're all getting to the venue at the same time. And, your band might be sleeping in a little bit. You're getting up the crew. When things start to become separated is when your artist decides they don't want to sit at a venue all day and they're going to go to a hotel. That means they need a different bus, or they've got more equipment, and your artist is going to be up late at night, and your load ins are very early in the morning, so you get stretched too thin because you have to sleep too. So now you take care of the production side and the crew, and the tour manager will start looking after the band. So it's really the scale of your tour that starts necessitating you have different bodies covering different aspects. So it starts off being all in one because it's all about moving and planning the next days ahead, but it becomes split into the tech side and the artist side. As things get bigger, the tour manager is looking after the artist movements, and then the artist press or the meet and greets, the VIP events, and the production manager's got a day full of tech load-in, stagehand, sound and light issues, and crew needs. So, that's when they separate. That's when you get into a more specialized job.
Yeah, that makes sense. We often refer to it, I guess, on the podcast, unofficially, officially as scaling, and just, the single job requires what used to be one person could do three things now becomes three people have to each do one thing. And it just grows bigger and bigger as you get higher. And I'm sure after a while, your tour manager gets a production coordinator, and just every small job becomes a big job.
Well, if you think about it, you got a small band. If you're a sound guy and you got a small band that's playing the club, maybe you've got 20, 30 or 40 inputs. You're using the house console. You've got, no matter what you do, you got 2 hours to get it dialed in and set. Then by the time you get into an arena, now you've got your own PA, you've got multiple delay systems, you're tuning a room. So what used to be your 2 hours, if you're a tour manager front of house, the 2 hours that you set aside to go dial in a PA and mix a room, it's got a fairly basic or rudimentary sound system. But that becomes a full day job for a front of house mixer in an arena. It's going to dial in delays and dial in front fills and dial in, flown PA and try to make sure the room's been scanned correctly. Now you don't have time to be a TM front of house. And the same thing if you're a tour manager, production manager, you got one bus is 12 bunks. You got 12 bodies and a driver. That's 13 people in one hotel room. By the time you get, a 40 or 50 member crew, and you've got a band that wants to stay at the Ritz-Carlton, and you got a crew that's going to really be at Embassy Suites, maybe for budget, or most of the crews don't want to stay at the hotels, the luxury hotels the band's at anyway, because a hotel burger is going to be $40. you got people going to different hotel rooms, and that just takes up time. So, a tour manager, it takes too much time to check people in and out of hotels. The scaling up is a good word, but those, what took you on a one bus tour, you spend an hour and a half a day dealing with a hotel. That could be 4 or 5 hours of the day.
There's so much that goes on. I've obviously been on tour, and I know that we get hotel rooms, but it's so hard to even understand that every hotel room we're in, somebody had to book. Every place to go, somebody had to plan. And just hearing you say it takes an hour or 4 hours for these things it's so wild to comprehend how much work goes into even these days off.
If you're doing an arena tour and you're on you're rolling into a hotel on your day off, say you're staying at Embassy Suites or somewhere like Lawrence, Kansas, you're out, you got 4 or 5 buses parked in the parking lot. There's a production coordinator who's in there getting every room key, making sure it gets to the bus. It's exceedingly rare that you can pay to have all those rooms bought the night before and walk into a big stack of keys. So
yeah,
you've seen it like everybody else. You're sitting there and it's your day off and you're in a folding chair outside the bus going, where the hell's my room? somebody's working on it. You may not see it, but somebody's working on it. And that's the best way we can do it, stay under budget. The production coordinator is in that lobby for 4 or 5 hours just to get a crew check in. And you just don't have that when you get, first of all, it's easier to move 12 people into a hotel than it is to move 50,
Yeah.
You don't have that kind of standing around. So yes, scaling up's a great term.
Man. So like as jobs scale up and as people, climb in the industry, I want to talk about wages eventually, but something we touched on earlier is just maintaining your own skill set. And I was wondering, maybe as a tour manager or as any job, really, what do you think is required of somebody on tour to grow? I guess I know there's a lot of variables in this. Like you said, Creed went from a van to an arena pretty quick. It might be impossible to grow as a crew member as fast as they did. But what are some things that people can do who are touring with a band and they notice that this band is growing and they're getting in bigger venues and they're getting more buses to make sure that they kind of stay on top of their job requirements?
If you're a vet, you should be focusing on your weak spots. If you're not good at something, find a way to get better. My Achilles heel is tour accounting. It's easy to tour manage and just not get to the accounting till later. If you come home from tour and you got 5 weeks of receipts to sort, it's miserable.
Oh my God.
My approach to that is to get it all into an online, Dropbox, scanned receipts, no paper anymore, and build a system where I have a receipt on my desk less than an hour before it's in my system and logged and done. And it took me a long time to get there. So if you're a vet, I think most vets are trying to focus on their weak points and try to figure out, a guitar tech out there who gets better with RF every day, or if he's got some extra time and goes and chases the hum that pops up sometimes. For young people, I think the biggest challenge, if you're really starting off, what I've found with a lot of younger crew hires that didn't make it is you hire somebody and you give them 10 things to do. So these are your gigs. If you're a production assistant, you're going to do your bus stock and you're going to do, you're going to do the dressing rooms and you're going to make sure that the towels are ready on stage. And I give the list of 10 things to a person. Person goes out and does those 10 things and finds a corner, gets on their phone, gets on social media. They're kind of like, okay, my work's done. This is my time. And unfortunately on tour, it costs so much to put somebody out to be on tour once you have their salary plus workers' comp, plus payroll not plus payroll, but plus busing, plus per diem and plus hotels. It's so expensive that if I find somebody who checks off a list and then kind of goes and makes a space for themselves or doesn't look how to expand on their skill set, then I'm going to move on from them pretty quickly, even if they're technically filling all the jobs. I'm looking for people that are always looking to be more valuable on tour. The people that stop by the office and say, hey man, I'm done early today. What's going on? Do you guys need a hand? Does somebody need to go up, grab ice for the bus? People that are looking to make themselves more valuable and expand their skill set are people that are going to stick around. And I don't want to date myself by saying a millennial hiring issue, but a millennial hiring issue I have is people that have like, take a list, a set of tasks, knock it off, and then kind of go vanish and be on their own. And like, I need you to constantly make yourself more valuable to me if you're going to survive out here. And I think whether or not everybody, describes it that way, I think that's what makes people stand out, more valuable and move from tour to tour.
Yeah, it just sounds like, you want people that are there for the team. You want people that are helping, they're there to work together. And I guess on the flip side then, let's say somebody's out on the road and they're doing their task every day and they're hopefully not doing the bare minimum. Is there an appropriate time to take personal time in the workday, or is it your opinion that, if you're awake, you're working kind of?
I don't want to say if you're awake, you're working. I don't believe that you should run everybody into the ground. When you need personal time, you should take personal time. I think there's a lot of room between somebody who knocks off the job and vanishes and then the person who really kind of makes himself available. Take your backline guys. Your backline guys they're usually the last person's in every day. And then they're kind of in their own bubble. You don't see backline guys grabbing, lighting trunks and moving them around. They also they're focused on the show. They're mission critical for those 2 hours that the artist is up there, and they're at ground zero. So, I'm not expecting backline guys to come in and go try to ice the buses or something. You can see that they've kind of got their bubble. It's when you're young and you're starting off, you should check in, see if you're available, see what you struggle with. If you're a production assistant and you're trying to do bus stock and you're still doing it while crew guys, lighting guys are finishing their loadout, piling up, and they're coming over to a bus, that's got cardboard boxes full of crap sitting on the counters and it's not put away, then it's pretty clear that you need to work on that area. But if you're finishing those things up and you're stopping in and saying, hey, is there something else you need me to do? Is there something I can cover? Then you're somebody making yourself valuable. I don't expect to see somebody run all day. I just expect to see
Yeah.
somebody with their head on a swivel, seeing if they can be available.
Yeah. So it sounds like the first step is to identify where your weaknesses are. And you can do that by asking your peers where they need help, or, thinking about where you're slacking. And then the second step is kind of to improve on those areas and hopefully make yourself more valuable. And it's nice hearing it from you, because you're the tour manager. You're the person that I would be afraid to ask these things on tour, because I know how busy you are. And it's really nice to have you now when you're not on the road to be able to ask you these crucial questions, because you're really the person, just as you were saying, the problem with millennial hires. And I know you didn't want to say that, but I'm just saying, just hearing you say that is so nice, because it's interesting to me knowing that you have this perspective of when you bring crew on, why crew leaves, like you see everything. Where as a photographer, like I see almost, I see very little. I see what the band does, and that's pretty much it. So you have a much better, meta understanding of everything that's going.
Well, I'll tell you this, if I have anybody on the crew who says, do you have a second? What I'm doing X, what could I be doing? Is there something where you see you need proof? If somebody comes and they're looking for that kind of constructive criticism, I will make time for anybody on the crew that's got like that. Anybody that's trying to see how they can improve themselves or be a better part of the team.
I think that's great. I was thinking back to when I first met you, and I know this isn't by any, well, maybe it is intentional, but I don't think it's intentional. I was so intimidated by you. I was like, if I say the wrong thing, I feel like I'm going to be in trouble. And I know it's part of the job as a tour manager to kind of be this caring person, but at the same time, you're strict, you're in charge of everybody. You have to look like a leader. But it's good to know that, you're open to helping people, because I like that.
I know that I'm a little bit emotionless, and sometimes people find that off-putting, or they don't know exactly how to deal with that. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I don't periodically use that to my advantage. Sometimes if I'm struggling or have an issue and somebody's kind of can't figure out where I'm coming from and it's making them unsettled, I might let the mood stay that way if it's to my advantage. But I think, if I can get to know my own crew and I can talk to people, I work hard to try to make myself available for crew. Sometimes I'm better at it, sometimes I'm not. But, making time for everybody is important. And being able to stop and answer questions and make sure that people have, that the door is open it's an important part of tour management. And you mentioned the term leader. I think it's better to manage, with the mindset that you're at the bottom and you're not at the top. The only reason a tour manager should be asking people to do things they want to do is because they're accountable for everything that everybody does out there.
Okay.
I go to you as a photographer and I'm saying, look, you can't take photos from here. You can't be, standing on a ladder doing this time. It's because I'm going to have to explain to somebody why you're doing it, why I didn't stop it. I mean, that's not to say you'll find plenty of people out there that have been on the receiving end of a screaming match with me, or, had a meltdown moment where I've completely lost it. Where the reality is I try to run every day like you're at the bottom. The only reason you're telling people what you want to do is because you're accountable for everything that they do.
That's interesting. Run every day like you're at the bottom. All right, I'm going to remember that one. That one's good. I have a quick question, too, about some terms you use, because I didn't know what they were, so I wrote them down. Is icing the bus mean just putting ice on the bus, like putting it in the coolers?
Just filling up the bus bench with ice, yeah.
Okay, and then what is mission critical? You said mission
something
critical.
That's absolutely going to happen for the show that day,
Okay.
You don't have batteries for the guitars, that's a $2. You can call that mission critical or call it a $2 showstopper. You haven't taken care of making sure you have AA batteries for the wireless rigs, and you got 7,000 people in an arena waiting for the show, and you're looking for AA batteries.
Have you seen this happen?
I have.
It's okay. We won't blame you. I'm sure it's not your fault, but I'm sure you've seen everything happen. Oh man, I love learning these terms that I just don't know about. Is mission critical, is that a pretty used term, or is that something unique to you?
I don't know if anybody else uses that. I live here on the Space Coast right next to NASA, and I'm surrounded by NASA employees, so I could have picked it up there as well as anywhere else. But
well, I'm pretending everybody uses it now because you use it.
Yeah, you've got an artist that only drinks a certain brand of water, and you wind up with the wrong bottle of water that night. You'll probably make it through a show just with a grumpy artist, but your guitar rig is not working, then you have a mission critical problem that needs to be solved.
Hey, that's fair. Well, I'm adding it to the glossary. It's official now. Something I like about you is that you've been on the road to see people come and go, stay for a long period of time, people that have been successful, unsuccessful. I know one of the points we already talked about was people's ability to grow, learn, and just be better. But what do you feel allows people to create a life on the road and then maintain that career for a long period of time? And then on the flip side, what makes people fail?
Well, I think for most people, you either wind up in this business for a very short period and find out that it's not for you, or you wind up thinking this is just the only thing you could ever think of doing, and then you're locked in it for life. I think it's more rare. They exist, but you don't find a bunch of people that say, I did this for 12 years and moved on, unless they found a local entertainment based gig. I think most people that get involved in live entertainment stay in live entertainment.
Lifers.
Yeah. It takes, if it's not, as much of a lifestyle as it is a career, I think it's a real challenge for people because, you don't, once you're on tour, all of your waking time is spent around the same people. You're in the hotel, you're around the same people. You wake up at a venue and you go to bed at a venue and you wake up at another venue. So if you're not ready to live your life the way people do that tour, then you're probably not going to make it a long time. You like all of those aspects where you just can't imagine yourself not doing it. You're probably not going to stay out there. And I think the people that realize it's not for them, for the most part, we're not talking about skills and ability, but talking about a desire, then they're out pretty quick. They go either switch back to doing local work in entertainment or project coordinating from the city they live in. They find a way they can do it and be at home. But if you're touring, you tend to stay in that lane. And there's a financial aspect, I think, for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, and that's a really interesting part to me because money is one of those things in this job where it's never talked about publicly for the most part because it's private. And then even when it's talked about in private, it's a very delicate issue. So yeah, I guess for me, like you enter with an artist at a certain rate, whatever it is, it's usually a weekly rate. You decide it with management or you decide it with whoever is deciding how much you get paid on a weekly basis. And then you're out on tour with them. How do you decide or how do you initiate? Because I'm sure you've gone through this plenty of times, especially, even just talking about your first artist you worked with, going from a van to a bus. Obviously, they're making more money. How do you ask for a raise or what's that conversation look like? And what are the terms that determine if you get a raise or not?
Well, if you see the band on the rising scale, then chances are your workload is changing as well. I can't speak to necessarily a photographer. I don't know that much about your side of things or even how photographers make money, but if you're,
I don't know either.
If you're a front of house mixer or a backline tech and you're working at the band in a club, if the band is upsizing and they're getting larger, they're probably buying more equipment. They're expecting you to understand how to operate more equipment. If you're a tour manager, you're looking after more bodies. So the question of a raise should never be, well, the artist is making more money, it's time for me to make more money. Or the real problem is a sense of entitlement. If you think they're making a ton of money, then you should be making it with them because you were there at the beginning. It doesn't work that way. If you want to enjoy that kind of success, you need to go write a song. And most of us crew members can't do that. So I think the question of the raise should be commensurate with the work expected of you. If you're the tour manager in the band in a band where you're rolling up to the club at 4:30 in the afternoon and you're loading in and you're playing and you're done by 9 and then you're back to a hotel or driving to the next city. And now you have a band bus and a crew bus and one truck. You're looking after more, and your salary should be reflecting, your responsibility. That's when the question of raise comes up. It should never be based on the band's success. It should be based on your workload.
No, that makes sense. And I guess maybe that's something I need to correct with the way I speak about it, because I guess I was shortcutting when I say, the band's getting bigger, which you can infer then the responsibilities grow. But really, the band could increase in size and it could not affect your pay if the responsibilities remain relatively similar. So that makes sense. And it's nice to hear you break that down on, how you think about it. And yes, definitely avoid entitlement. That sounds ideal. And so as far as pay goes, it's usually weekly. And then eventually my understanding is, and I've only toyed with this a little bit, I haven't really been paid this way a lot. People sometimes get put on retainer. What circumstances arise where that is how you're working for an artist? Or can you explain that to me? Because I honestly don't even know enough to ask the questions correctly.
In our business, you're paid at the end of the week. When you get that check, you're technically done. I mean, our industry is viewed as a right to work business. Most of us work in right to work states, which means at any given moment, the artist can say, thanks, it's been great. Friday's your last day. Or, this isn't working out. Here's your plane ticket home. And then you're done. So technically, every time we fly somebody home, if they're not getting paid for that day, they're free to go find another job. That's the really cut and dry rule of it. So some bands will say, I don't want to try to negotiate with you. I got 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off. I don't want you to take another tour of that 2 weeks off because you're not going to get paid the 2 weeks. I'm going to give you a retainer which says, I'm going to give you a percentage of your salary, but that locks you in from taking something else. I don't care what you do while you're being retained. But when I say time to go to work, then you come back to work. That's the cut and dry of it on 95% of the deals out there. You got a retainer, which makes you available when the artist calls you to play. Sometimes it's a high retainer because they've got short breaks and they just don't want to argue with you about, these 2 weeks or 3 weeks between legs. Or sometimes it might shut you down and say, hey, look, we got like 5 months, but I still want to make sure you don't take anything without talking to me. So you're going to get a 25% or 20% retainer. You get this little check every month. And that little check just means before you do anything else, you're calling me. And, you'll hold off if I say, no, I need you on this date, and you're not going to take other work. So that's the retainer's really made to make you available when the band goes back to work. Because in our industry, there's no guarantees. We usually pay somebody when we send them out the door, and then that pay ends the moment they get home. And the retainer is kind of that next step.
Okay. Is it more common when you get to a certain level, or is it, I don't know how common it is, I guess.
I don't know that it's common by a level. I know bands, big arena bands that will pay a super high premium and will never pay a retainer because that's the way they budget. And they're like, we're fine with it. We're still going to get an absolute best in the industry person because we're paying a really high salary. But at the end of every run, we're done. And we'll just take you higher as we go. So I don't know, there's a certain level when you get to it. But as bands become more, as their performance becomes more sophisticated, if they're a band that's doing, automation or really complicated scenery, it may really vest them to have the same people around if they take a break on a tour and know that it's not going to be, you're not going to have to pay to train everybody up to get, familiar with the show or anything. So, and for an artist, when it comes to backline mixers and their tour manager, production manager, there can also be a comfort level of, I just want to know the same person's there all the time. So I need to cut a salary deal with them that makes me know no matter what my plans are, I've got them available.
Okay. That makes sense. So it's kind of like making sure you have, less variables if you can keep the same people on, or less room for, forgetting the batteries in the guitar and things like that.
I mean, it's the same reason people pay attorneys a retainer. They've got an attorney on call. It's the same thing you do with your own crew. Because we don't work in an annual salary type of structure, the retainer is what keeps you available when they're not working.
Okay, that makes sense. Something that I actually ran into recently, I was actually at a wedding and I was talking to somebody, and it was a hard thing to explain for somebody who's not in the music industry. But to sum it up, when you're talking about money or talking about anything business, you hardly ever go direct to the artist. You always go to management, or you go to the person who handles that aspect of the business. How would you explain that to somebody who's newer to the industry, who's working with an artist? They're friends with them, they hang out with them every day. Really, it's only a decision away to bring that up during a conversation. But how do you kind of teach that to somebody so they understand why, you don't talk business to the artist?
I think if somebody brings up business with the artist, I first of all, on most of the tours that I do, if they're going to bring up business with the artist, I feel like I've already made a hiring error because they're not going to be sticking around anyway. Everybody, military, fire departments, hospitals, has a chain of command, and everybody exists to handle certain issues. If a new person asked me that question, hopefully before they actually went and talked to the artist about their salary, then my explanation would be touring is one, for an artist business enterprise. They've got record publishing, merchandising, sponsorship, it's touring. They've got all these different lanes, and they have people looking after all those lanes. An artist can't be intimately involved in every aspect of their business. In the case of, Paramore, who I work for, usually has on tour about 35 people. They're not going to know the salaries of all 35 people, and they're not going to know what a comparative salary would be if they've got a drum tech who wants to say that he's entitled to something more for his work. They're not going to know. So they have people that look after that. And most artists will bristle at the idea of being confronted by that because they already know they're paying somebody to look after those things. But they also don't have, a CEO of Pfizer doesn't know what his truck drivers are making. So that you don't take that directly up the ladder, even though that's your artistic lead and the person who calls the shots for the show. You're there to build a show, and the staff that's there to work on are there to take care of those kinds of questions. You do see people every once in a while feel like they've got a problem that needs to go to the band. And, if you really think you need to go to the band about something, you need to have your ducks in a row.
Yeah. What would that even be? I don't know what qualifies that.
Over a 30-year career, I have seen salary negotiations stall out with crew to the point where they'd say, they're going to have to explain to the band why they're not going to be at the next tour live. And you see, a ripple go through if they're trying to cut a deal with business management, and business management held the line, then the band wouldn't have, appreciate that. Hopefully, if you come to me and you're looking for a salary raise, if it's something that I think I can handle on my own, I will. If it's something that I think could cause an issue, I'll take that along with other issues I need to discuss with management, business management, and cycle it up through the ranks to say, we may have to make an adjustment here. If hopefully people are talking to their supervisors, tour managers, production managers, business managers, and they're handling the request legitimately. If somebody is just, towing a line and saying, I'm not going to address your concerns, and not just salary, safety, or otherwise, to the crew member says they've got to go outside the lane and go talk to the artist. And they really need to make sure they're on the right side of their argument. It's something I would not do lightly, because it's either going to wind up, you're either going to get your problem solved, or more often than not, I've seen the problem be solved and the person go away. So
yeah, the problem isn't solved in the way they imagined. Probably,
yeah,
it's solved by it no longer exists. So maybe actually I have a mistake in my understanding of touring, which I am looking to correct. And it might be because of my experience as a photographer, but photographer, I always work directly with management on that. Is that usually actually like guitar tech, backline, sound, like the majority of the core touring crew? Is that done with a tour manager or production manager sometimes figuring out their salary, or is it mostly done with management?
It depends on the tour.
Okay.
I'm working on a tour coming up right now where all of my salary negotiations are done with the business manager. The other artists I work with, Paramore, it's never done that way. It's almost always done with management or a management business manager combination. It can vary for anywhere. Now, as a tour photographer, you're probably going to wind up speaking to more managers than tour managers, because it's usually not under the tour manager's umbrella to coordinate a social media team. That's usually falling under a manager. So for you, I would expect that you talk to managers more.
Okay. That's what I was identifying as you were speaking. And I was like, okay, I might have to check myself on my experience here based on other crew experience,
I don't think so, because I have hired a photographer maybe 3 times in my career. But, it would be rare that would land on a tour manager, or more rare.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So before you take a tour, I know you're talking about going into another tour right now. What are the things, and I know this is going to be unique for you based on your experience in the industry and your role, and you are probably far more experienced, most likely, than most people listening to this podcast. But I think that the things you take in consideration can still be paralleled or at least reflected in other people trying to take tours. What, other than the money, what do you look into with a team before you take the tour?
Other than the money, I'll look at the itinerary. I try to get an idea of the workload. Try to learn a little bit how the artist works to make sure we're the right fit. A lot of there are a lot of really talented people that aren't the right fit for each other, that are really good at their jobs, got great morals, instincts, and stuff. They're just not the right fit for a certain band. So I think as you age, you suss it out to make sure you feel like you're the right guy. I had a tours recently a year ago that I was going to sign on to, and then as I got into it, I realized I needed a different type of tour manager, and ultimately wound up passing because I didn't think we were going to enjoy our time together. The workload, making sure you understand the job, is a big part of the fit. Make sure you understand how the pieces are going to move and who you're going to be working with.
And are those questions you kind of just ask management, or does that involve an interview process for you, or how in depth is that process for you before you take a role? I know your job is, being a tour manager, you're working directly with the artist. You're working very closely with all parts of that team.
As a tour manager, 80% of your hires are going to involve an interview with the artist. Usually a phone, or sometimes in person. I've done both, where you try to just hang out a little bit and see if you fit. The artist, if you're interviewing with an artist, they might have legitimate logistic questions. Some of them might just want to go to lunch and see if there's somebody that, somebody you can tolerate being on the bus. They can tolerate being on the bus. So most of the time, if you're tour management, you're going to be speaking with the artist. Some of the time, as a production manager, you'll speak with the artist, but not as much. When you're tour managing, they definitely want to get an experienced band's going to want to get a vibe. A band that's in free fall or a tailspin that might have some serious touring issues that need to be addressed quickly, you might get thrown in a hurry, and it might be a little bit different. But usually, if it's something and you're being interviewed for a project that's on the horizon, they'll spend some time with you.
Okay. What's it mean when a band's in a free fall or tailspin? Does that mean they're just going through a rough part of their career or life?
That would be like when we met on A Day to Remember, where the tour had clearly outgrown the skill set of some of the people that were there, and they're having real problems.
Man, when you get into the intricacies of touring, it's so much more than you expect. At first, I'm just like, you go on tour. What do you mean? You work for an artist. And there's so many more details, especially that get, focused on as these tours get to higher and higher levels. And it is crazy that it's not all written down. It's just kind of a thing that you learn as you go. And like you're saying, you just learn by being out there. And it's what a system to have through word of mouth for the most part.
Well, I mean, touring is kind of always had a pirate mentality and all for one or us against the world. Because,
I like that.
In the traditional mold that I saw, when I started in the early 90s, so you're out there kind of against the world trying to break your band and play songs, win fans and chase women and do all the things that sound like it'd be a lot of fun for your kid, out there on tour. But the more business is successful, the more, money's involved. And as you age, it becomes a business. And all of a sudden, guys who just want to rock out and play really cool songs or CEOs in a corporation that has to have quarterly meetings and has to have paperwork filed. And it's a business. And it still has, and I hope it always has, a little bit of that pirate mentality. And, you're us against the world, and you're kind of a bunch of vagabonds wandering wherever you need to go to do the next show. I love all of that. But business is at the bottom line. You can't ignore the business side. The band had a great time. They didn't make any money, but the tour was amazing. It just doesn't work because you come home and there's still a mortgage to pay, and band members that have children, the kids like electricity. You got to cover all those things. So you just can't do it for the love of the game per se for the entirety of your life. It's a business.
Yeah, and I mean that brings me to another point that I think we've gone through like different phases of people touring. We've gone through you're just out there living it. You don't have any responsibilities. You just live on the road. And then it turns into more of a career and a business. And like you said, there's a lot of paperwork. And then eventually people kind of, create a family, usually in life. And I know you have a family currently. And obviously your kids aren't older than 30. So obviously that started while you were touring. What kind of conversations or things did you take into consider before pursuing, that part of your life, specifically pertaining to maintaining and having the career and lifestyle you do?
Well, I was lucky because so far I've been lucky. My kids are very young and I have plenty of time to screw up the whole fat father thing by being a touring guy. I met my wife a month before my 40th birthday. When we got married, I was 44. And we had, she wanted children. It was not too late for me, but certainly later than most people start to have kids. So I said, if you want kids, we got to get going quick. So we had my kids when I was 45 and then 47. I'm 51 now. In the case of, myself and my spouse, I have the advantage of maybe a little more maturity than I would have had in my 20s. And we were able to talk a little bit. We were able to plan how we were going to run our family unit with me in a touring career. And we talked about me if I wanted to stop touring. It's something I gave serious consideration to. But it's not something that's really made sense or it's not really been a viable option for us and our financial goals for me to stop touring because we know it would take a hit on our salary if I stopped and did a non-touring job.
Yeah.
So for me, I had the age. I think that I had the age to my advantage, and I had the ability to talk to my wife about it and say, if we're going to have kids, this is what I bring to the table, and this is what you've got. So it wasn't like I was 24 and I stopped in a city and met a girl, fell in love, married her in a hurry, and then all of a sudden she was pregnant, and I hadn't really thought it out. The benefit of my age was that we could kind of lay that out and decide if we were going to try to take it on, but under our circumstances. I mean, our industry is riddled with people, especially my age or older, that have had a brilliant touring career blossom over the carnage of failed family relationships. So it takes a huge commitment, but it's not just a commitment for you, but it's a commitment for your entire family. And your kids don't get a choice in that commitment. So as our kids age, we'll try to address that and address their needs as they learn that they've got a father who's present 24 hours a day when I'm not on tour, and then gone when I'm on tour, and how to balance those things. I can't say to how that's going to turn out because I'm living that experience as we speak. But as far as the start, that's the advantage that we had, and I hope anybody else that gets into it has the opportunity to try to sort that out with their spouse before they get too far down the road.
Well, I love that. I love I love how much thought you put into it, and I wouldn't expect anything otherwise, especially coming from somebody like you. And it's good to see. Have you had the pleasure of taking your kids to a concert yet?
Victoria, my daughter, went to her first concert at 6 months old with headgear and head protection, and she's been to just about every tour that I've been on since then. She's 6 now; she'll be 7.
Oh man, that's awesome.
And my 4-year-old has been to shows as well. They love it. My family, when I was a child, didn't really grow up listening to music. Now they go to shows and they listen to the music, at least the music that's appropriate for them. And they have there's a lot of music playing in our household that wasn't playing in my household as a kid. My parents weren't really fond of that. So they've got a much more music immersive lifestyle than I did. And I'm excited to see how that develops with them.
Yeah. Nothing makes me happier than seeing a kid at a concert with the big headphones on, just rocking outside stage. I just know they're having the best time. Yeah. Hey, puppy.
I've got some great video of my son and daughter, especially my daughter, at some 21 Pilots shows where she's just fascinated by the lighting, the spectacle, and then as she's aged, recognizing the songs, and dancing and singing. It's been a fun journey so far. And she's only 6, so I hope it stays that way, at least until I've got a jaded teenager on my hands. Probably won't like any bands Daddy works for.
I don't know. You work for some pretty cool bands. I think she'll be. It'd be hard to see, your daughter not being like, my dad's cool, because I think that'd be pretty cool. Well, I kind of relate to you. I didn't grow up with music as well, so I can't imagine what it's like to have a father who, has music at home and takes you to concerts and takes you backstage. And 21 Pilots is overwhelming for somebody, just a normal aged person going to the show. I can't imagine being a child going to one of their concerts. It must just be magical.
Wow. They seem to really enjoy it.
Well, hell yeah. Well, I mean, that pretty much brings us to the end of the hour, and we've covered most things that I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much for your time, Andrew. I appreciate it.
It's a lot of fun. I'm glad to do it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Have you done any podcasts before? Is this your first podcast? Or
no? I got asked to do one on Facebook, and I think I forgot to reply, and I can't remember. It's called "Get on the Bus" or something. I really don't even recall which one it was. Right now, I'm doing a lot of fill-in stuff with different show projects and so my time's spread thin, looking for buses, or I'm trying to help people get equipment sorted. So I'm a little bit spread thin normally.
Yes, I understand that. And, thank you again. I can't thank you enough for making time for this and sharing your knowledge. And I'm excited to put this out. And we do have one question. I say we, but it's just me. I do have one question that we ask everybody. And I wanted to know, shower shoes or no shower shoes? What's your vibe on tour?
Well, I call it an audible because I wear flip-flops almost every day. I always have like 2 or 3 pairs of flip-flops. So if I'm headed to the shower and I take one look and it doesn't look great, then I go in with my flip-flops that I'm wearing, especially when I tour manage. I tour manage in flip-flops. My production manage.
Really? I don't know if I ever noticed that.
Oh, yeah. If I production manage, I'm wearing boots. But if I'm tour managing, I'm in flip-flops. So my daily wear, if the shower looks sketchy, I'm straight in with my flip-flops. I just swap them out, the dry pair out of my suitcase. So
it's your shower shoes, but not just shower shoes in the shower. Your shower shoes all the time.
Shower shoes all the time. Yeah. But actually going into
yeah, that's a full commit. We haven't had that answer yet. That's amazing. And I don't know how I never noticed your revealed toes. So I've seen your toes, that means, but I've never seen your chin. So that's
probably not. Yeah.
Have you seen your chin?
I have. It's been a number of years.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a pretty good look.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you and seeing you in real life again, and whenever that might be.
Take care, Adam. Thanks.